Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Unboxed. Let's continue our conversation about building the Black family so that we can unbox the power and the potential of the Black family. I'm Dr. Robert Davis, family life educator and relationship coach, and welcome to Unboxed, a frank and straightforward conversation about relationships. We're going to talk about family, church, workplace, and all other types of relationships. Join me for the next few moments as we unbox the power and potential of relationships and help you to live your best life. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Robert Davis. Welcome to another episode of Unboxed, and where we unbox the power and the potential of all relationships. And today specifically, we want to unbox the power and the potential of the Black family. As we continue talking about how we build up the Black family, we're talking about stress and conflict as we move forward. Listen, do me a favor before I get started. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. That's right, like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to jump right into it. So yesterday we were talking about how families respond to conflict, stress, tension, and anxiety. You know, there are just natural ways that human beings respond. But we have to look specifically at the African-American context, because the African-American family, while it responds similarly to any other family would respond, we have to also take into consideration the psychological pre-programming, and I've been using that term an awful lot. You hear me use it a lot. The psychological pre-programming that takes place or has taken place in the African-American community. I told you about two scholars that I wanted you to become familiar with. The first one, of course, is Dr. Joy DeGruy. Her book is Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. I'll talk more about that in just a moment, or rather on another day. But today I'm going to introduce you to someone by the name of Rachel Yehuda. She deals with intergenerational trauma transmission. Now, when we talk about how the Black family functions, let's start right there. According to the fourth edition, and now this is going to bring attention to the work that Dr. Joy DeGruy did. According to the fourth edition of the Diagnostic Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, the following are a list of some of the conditions which give rise to mental and or emotional traumas that justify the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm going to read just a few of those, and they are a serious threat or harm to one's life or physical integrity, a serious threat or harm to one's life or physical integrity, a threat or harm to one's children, spouse, or close relative. This is what produces post-traumatic stress disorder. Sudden destruction of one's home or community. Seeing another person injured or killed as a result of accident or physical violence. Learning about a serious threat to a relative or a close friend being kidnapped, tortured, or killed. Stressor is experienced with intense fear, terror, and helplessness. Stressors and disorders is considered to be more serious and will last longer when the stressor is of human design. So I want you to hear those various things. If this doesn't describe the experience of the African American since the day they arrived on this continent in the 1500s, and then was reintroduced in the 1600s to this torture, then I don't know what does. So I want to share with you, that is the reality. And we're going to talk more about how that reality has impacted the way that the African American family functions, because our ultimate goal is for us to understand and to take ownership. To understand and to take ownership. We can't ask the victimizer to take ownership of our recovery. We have to take ownership of our own recovery. That's I strongly believe, and I'll teach you why as we move forward on that. Now, Dr. Rachel Yehuda and Amy Lerner wrote an article together called Intergenerational Transmission of Trauma Effects, Putative Role of Epigenetic Mechanisms. Again, intergenerational transmission of trauma effects, putative role of epigenetic mechanisms. And I'm going to read part of what she wrote. I'm getting old, so I got to tilt it toward the light. The concept of intergenerational trauma acknowledges that exposure to extremely, listen to the language now, exposure to extremely adverse events impacts individuals to such a great extent that their offspring find themselves grappling with their parents' post-traumatic state. The experience of trauma, or more accurately, the effect of that experience, is passed somehow from one generation to the next through epigenetic mechanisms. A wide range of phenomena was described in studies reporting behavioral difficulties in Holocaust offsprings. Now, I want you to think about this. Rachel Yehuda, which is obviously a Jewish name, she was doing studies on Holocaust victims. And as you know, Holocaust victims were only exposed to the Holocaust for, and I don't want to get this wrong and I don't want to minimize, but I know there was somewhere between 3 and 7 years. Please forgive me that I didn't brush up on my history before I came here. But you think about African Americans who were exposed to it for hundreds of years, then followed by Jim Crow and all the other stuff that happened. You can imagine that it's even more. So let me go back to this now. A wide range of phenomena was described in studies reporting behavioral difficulties in Holocaust offspring. These included feelings of over-identification and fused identity with parents, impaired self-esteem stemming from minimalization of offspring's own life experience in comparison to the paternal trauma, tendency toward catastrophizing, worry that parental trauma would be repeated, and behavioral disturbances such as experiencing anxiety, traumatic nightmares, dysphoria, which is just a general dissatisfaction with life, guilt, hypervigilance, and difficulties in interpersonal functioning. Similar types of symptoms were later described in the children of Vietnam veterans, a phenomenon that was termed secondary traumatization. I want you to catch this now. They have been able to identify that Vietnam veterans, Holocaust survivors, and it's only logical to think that the descendants of those who were exposed to slavery and whose children after slavery ended was exposed to Jim Crow and segregation, and then their children being exposed to mass incarceration, etc. You have this passing down of trauma, but you have this repeating of trauma. So in the African-American community, it's not an event that just happened and then ended, but there is this repeated ongoing that we're constantly having to face. And I wanted to say that because it is within this context that the African-American family was both formed as well as functions. But I want to take it one step further, if you don't mind, and then I'm going to end on this. Something that I read from James Baldwin, because a lot of times we ask ourselves, why is it so difficult for our white counterparts to understand, or our white brothers and sisters to really understand the magnitude of Blackness in America? And I want to just read something that James Baldwin said. You can find it in the movie or the documentary, I'm Not Your Negro. He says, "You cannot lynch me and keep me in ghettos without becoming something monstrous yourselves." So we're looking at not just African Americans who are struggling with the impact of racism in America, but we're also looking at a lot of whites, as Malcolm X and Dr. King talked about, a lot of whites who remain silent. You cannot maintain your full emotional completeness when you are privy to, and when you stand by and watch all kinds of brutality. So you're looking now at families of African Americans that are impacted because of the direct racism on them, and the descendants of the former slave owners and those who were a part of the slave system, even though they didn't own slaves, and the impact that has now been passed down to their children. It makes a big mess. And since I can't solve everybody's problem, I'm going to try to work to see how we can solve the African-American person's problem. But I wanted to share that with you. We're going to pick right back up here tomorrow. We're going to talk more about how the African-American family was formed, how it functions, and then how we take ownership to get out of this and move to the next level. Again, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share, and let's continue to unbox the power and the potential of all relationships. Until tomorrow, have a good evening.
Seasoned with Grace, Unboxed also provides healthy relationship training and leadership development for businesses, churches, and community organizations. For a free consultation to discuss your team's needs, please contact us at our website at swg-unboxed.org. That's swg-unboxed.org.